to mark the 181st anniversary of the death of Brother Arnos Vale. But before I get into my talk, which is brief, can I just say a huge vote of thanks to Carl, because she organizes all of this every year with enormous enthusiasm. So can we have a round of applause? Oh.
I would do a curtsy.
And it's very kind of you to ask the representative Brahma Samaj at this meeting.
Yes.
And of course, the Brahma Samaj evolved from the Brahma Sabha, which was
yes.
divided by Ram Roy. So that's fine. So for the next 2 minutes, we're going to talk about Raja Ram Roy's world vision. Okay? So I've always very interested in how ideas form and evolve across geographies, across timescales, and therefore it's been very fascinating for me to understand how someone who was born in the 18th century in rural Bengal, in a devout Brahmin household, has a world vision, and not just any old world vision, by the way. It has impact in the form of starting off the Renaissance in Bengal and in India in the 19th century, leading up to the independence of India in the 20th century, and even now we have a lot of relevance of what he said and what he foresaw in this 21st century. But, you know, you don't come up with a world vision just like that. You need a number of things, and when I talk about things, I talk about competences and these things that you have to have in order to come up with a world vision or anything. And there are 3 things that I want to talk about. One is analytical thinking, the second one is conceptual thinking, and the third one is strategic thinking. And I'll talk about those in a minute. Okay? So analytical thinking is about looking at a situation or a problem and breaking it down into understandable chunks. Okay? And Raja Ram Roy did a lot of that. He read lots and lots of material. For example, the Hindu scriptures that he read, and he was able to dissect those scriptures and understand what actually lay behind them, what the original thinking was. And so in this context, you know, he came up with the idea that Hinduism, what made the heart of Hinduism, was the worship of the supreme being, the supreme creator, Brahma. His third knowledge analysis encompassed Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and of course more diverse political and financial matters like the Great Reform Act of 1832 and taxation in India. But one doesn't come up with world vision if you don't put all of these things, all of these bits of knowledge into a framework or a model. And that's what conceptual thinking is about. It's about putting together things in a framework or a model. And in Raja Ram Roy's case, there are 2 models of frameworks that I'd like to talk about. One was, he was a very keen advocate of interchange ideas between East and West. And the second framework he was very keen on was the principles of liberty or liberalism. So take the first one first. Having immersed himself in Hindu, Muslim, and Buddhist ideas during the early part of his life, he was very well placed to talk about those when he came in contact with the Westerners, and in particular the British, which culminated in his trip to England in 1830. Equally, he viewed that the East had a great deal to learn from the West. For example, in fields of democracy, science, and of course liberty, is second of his frameworks. And in this context, let me talk a little bit about liberty and liberalism, because as we've already heard, he was quite keen on the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And remember, the French Revolution was in 1793, and Raja came to Britain in 1830. So we're talking about a few years, and he was quite very enthusiastic about this. And on his way from India to England, he stopped off at Cape Town. And in Cape Town, by coincidence, there happened to be And despite the fact that he had actually hurt his leg in an accident earlier in the trip, he insisted that he had to go to these French ships. And when he went there, he was quoted as saying how much delighted he was to be under the banner that waved over the decks, and evidence of the glorious triumph of the right, the might. And what was he talking about? Well, what he was talking about was essentially the tricolour, the French tricolour was flying on top of the ships. And to him, it represented all that was good about the French Revolution. The things like liberty, fraternity, and equality, those were things that resonated hugely in his mind. I'm talking about that sort of thing. He was quite partial to the British liberals as well, by the way. He was very familiar with John Locke. He was considered the father of classical liberalism. In fact, he quoted John Locke left, right, and centre when he came to arguments. And he also quoted Francis Bacon quite a lot, by the way. And the other person I want to talk about in this context is Jeremy Bentham. And Jeremy Bentham, the utilitarian philosopher, whose ideas were associated with the liberal movement, he was also a big fan of. In fact, before he came to England, there was an exchange of letters between Jeremy Bentham and the Raja. And when he arrived here, Jeremy Bentham, who was by the way 83 or 84 around about this time, he was quite old, he was mainly housebound, he made a very special effort just to come and see the Raja in London. So you can understand how he was into that liberal mindset. And then I want to talk about the third competency, which is strategic thinking. And strategic thinking is about taking those conceptual ideas and placing them in some time frames. And in particular, looking forward. And that's where the world vision comes in. And the world vision has several aspects to it, so I'll just mention a few now. And I'm conscious of the time, I said I did that, so lunch away to a lot of people, so I won't keep you from that. But I think one of the things that was very important for him was democracy. And when he came to England, he was an ardent supporter of the Reform Act that was proposed by the Whigs. And equally, on a number of occasions, he had vigorous debates with the Tories to oppose the bill. And this particular bill, if you're not familiar with the British history of that era, was all about enlarging the franchise, the voting population, and getting rid of things like bottom boroughs, which you probably heard of in his history lessons. And so he was very pro the bill. Another aspect he was very keen on was social equality, and in this context, let me mention the fact that he asked for reduction of taxes for poor people in India. But he wasn't sort of naive enough to say, oh, just reduce the taxes. He actually proposed some other stuff to fill the gap that was left by the reduction of the taxes. And so one of the things he suggested was that this decrease in tax should be matched by increases in taxes on, guess what? Luxury goods. Have you heard that before somewhere?
Yeah.
Right. So in 1830, he was talking about imposing greater taxes on luxury goods. He even proposed business process outsourcing or offshore business processes in about 160 years before it became part of our job. And you all know the BPO, business process outsourcing, right? Well, way back then, he was proposing that. And why was he proposing that? It was again in the context of this reduction of taxes for poor. Because what he wanted to do was he said that the lower salaried Indian staff could replace the higher salaried European staff who were collecting the taxes. So he was already thinking about all sorts of things which eventually came to fruition much later on. Another aspect that is part of our history is the large amount of migration of people like myself and here from the British colonies to the UK. But Rajaram had a slightly different swing to this one. He suggested that there should be limited migrations of Europeans to India. But he also added that these Europeans should be educated persons of character and capital. Okay? I think it's a peculiar thing, you might say. But the reason why he said this is because his vision is very much an anglicized India. And in turn, India would act as an enlightenment for the rest of Asia. So that's where he was heading towards. And of course, as part of the vision, he also thought about possible independence of India, which of course came to pass much later on. However, what really mattered to him was that the people should be treated liberally and governed in an enlightened manner. I think that was basically the bottom line for me as far as the vision is concerned. So I'd just like to conclude by reminding you of the formidable set of thinking competencies that Radha Ram possessed, and the world vision that he created has served us extremely well for the past 181 years, and I hope that we should continue to be inspired by that world vision that he created for many more years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You have encompassed the worlds of the Raja and the thinking. Thank you very much. I know I was looking forward to it. May I see your notes afterwards?